जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी, जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी। गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी, जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन। यमुना तीरा वनचारी, यमुना तीरा वनचारी। जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी, जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जय राधा गिरिधारी राधे, जय राधा गोपीनाथ राधे, जय राधा गोपीनाथ राधे। जय गौरानिताय, 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 जय गौरानिताय। जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद, जय जय प्रभुपाद, जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद, जय जय प्रभुपाद। गुरुदेव 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 गुरुदेव। Hare Krishna. So before going ahead, just want to chant the invocation prayers. ओम अपवित्रो पवित्रो वा सर्वावस्थां गतोऽपि वा यस्मरेत् पुंडरीकाक्षं स बाह्य अभ्यन्तरं शुचिः। श्री विष्णु श्री विष्णु। ओम अज्ञानातिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। श्री चैतन्य मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदामयं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे। नमो महावदान्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामने गौरतिशे नमः। श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातम् अहं वन्दे परमानंद माधवं श्रीगुरुं दीनतारणं। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। शृण्वतां स्वकथा कृष्णा पुण्यश्रवण कीर्तनः हृदयन्तोऽस्थः भद्राणि विधोनोति सुहृत्सतां। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंद गोपकुमाराय गोविंदाय नमो नमः। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Again, just to express my gratitude to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, without whose contributions throughout his life, especially towards the latter part of his life, where he translated and commentated on all these wonderful scriptures, we would have no access to any of these. We wouldn't even know the names. without Srila Prabhupada's contribution. So before going ahead, so we'll read the Leelamrita. So yeah, I think this is where we stopped. Am I correct, Mataji? Yesterday?
You start from when Srila Prabhupada heard about the latest development.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. So when Srila Prabhupada heard about the latest developments, he did not share his disciples' optimism. On February 3rd, he wrote to Gagamuni, I had a talk with your brother Brahmananda yesterday on the dial. I'm very glad. I'm glad that Mr. Price has promised to return the amount of $750 in case no sale contract is made. But in any case, you should not pay any farthing more than what you have already paid, either to the lawyer or to Mr. Price, unless there's an actual sale contract made. It appears to me very gloomy about the transaction because there was no basic understanding before the payment of $1,000, either to the lawyer or to the real estate. This is not business-like. Unless there's a basic understanding, there is a way of transaction. If there's no basic understanding, why so much waste of time and energy? I cannot understand. If there's some basic understanding, why has it changed so quickly? I am therefore perturbed in mind. When there is no basic understanding, what is the need for appointing lawyer? Anyway, it's my advice that you should consult me before issuing any further money. But I hope you will make the transaction successful without further delay. Srila Prabhupada had also instructed Gargamuni to protect the $10,000 in the bank and never withdraw any sum that would leave a balance of less than 6,000. Srila Prabhupada had left one account for which the devotees were the signers, but he had also an account for which he controlled the funds. He now asked the devotees to put $6,000 from their account into his. He wrote to Brahmananda, the $6,000 will be transferred forthwith by me as soon as there is a sale contract for purchase of the house. On February 10th, Prabhupada wrote to Kirtanananda, regarding the house, I was correct in my remark that there is no definite understanding. In such negotiations, everything is done in black and white. Nothing is being done in black and white, but everything is done with faith on Mr. Price. Shall we end here, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
So we feel so frustrated reading this chapter because the boys are going to lose the money and Srila Prabhupada is really trying to stop them. Thank you so much. So we'll continue Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, verse 62, talks between Narada and King Prachina Barhi. So this is a very long chapter and the devotees have wonderfully covered so many important points so far, where we saw that King Prachina Barhi is unable to grasp the purport, even though the allegory was told to him. And now it's the reverse. Instead of telling the philosophy first and then the purport and then the allegory, first the allegory is said and then the philosophy is explained to him. And again, Narada Muni patiently explains the purport and how the living entity is transmigrating various bodies. And in spite of the living entity's eternal friend being close to him, the living entity is unable to see the friend. And he explains how the human-like body is best suited for enjoyment of all the senses. And the material intelligence which powers the human body is actually ignorance of one's true identity, as we'll see in today's verse as well. And the enjoyment is attempted using the various life airs and senses. And the sense organs are the gates of the body. And the mind is the commander of the above. So very nicely, Narada Muni has explained. And he's telling, we are free. We have the freedom. The sensory input can either degrade us or elevate us. And the various obstructions to material enjoyment also he explains. Mind, it's the agent to pursue enjoyment or suffering, but living entity is slave to his material intelligence, trying to fulfill desires very strongly, riding on the Manoratha, chariot of the body. But powerful time reduces our lifespan, and how old age as a sister of death attacks us, and the bodily and mental disturbances as we see as we go through life, these are actually all the soldiers of death. And constantly we are tribulations by providence, other entities, and the own body and mind. And the lust for material enjoyment, in spite of all these tribulations, my lust is blinding me to all these tribulations. And we have independence. The Lord has given us full independence to choose a fortune, a good fortune or bad fortune. And material best behavior and destination is influenced by the modes of nature, as we'll see today as well. The cure for material miseries, we are wandering high and low, driven by desires, impossible to counter material miseries. Only cure for material miseries, waking up to Krishna consciousness. Again, he explained. And by surrender to the representative of the Supreme Lord. And by constant hearing of the glories of the Supreme Lord. The devotees are covered very nicely in the previous things. And no amount of austerity, meditation, education can help us. All these material qualities. Only pure devotion. Only by engaging in pure devotional service. And only when the Lord favors us, only then we are able to give up the material activities. And then he explains the purpose of the Vedas, that the ritualistic Vedas don't yield the ultimate goal. And the purpose of the Vedas is to understand our real home. Engage only in those activities that please the Supreme Lord. And real education is recognizing Krishna as the super soul and the supreme friend. And then he explains the signs of karma, how karma translates from one birth to another, one body to another. And he explains the story of the deer, oblivious to his precarious position. He is just attached to the household life. And similarly, he explains the dangers of household life. So nicely, we are enveloped in household life and forget the dangers. And so he again emphasizes giving up the attraction for material existence. And he's contrasting between the spiritual and material teachers. Right? Prachina Bari, he says, oh, my material teachers didn't explain to me all this. And then he explained who is a real teacher. And the great signs of karmic reactions, now Narada begins to explain. And even though the real gross body is gone, the subtle body is still there to reap the results, good or bad. And the change of the gross body is just like a dream. So wonderful comparison, the dream and how the gross body is changed like a dream. And so today we come to the bodily conception, where Narada goes to the bodily conception in detail. Let's make it bigger. You chant this verse. SB 42962. Mamaite manasa yadyad asav aham iti bruvan grihniya tat puman radham karma yena punar bhavaha. The devotees. Okay? Any of the devotees want to chant?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Okay, Prabhu, please continue.
Yeah, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandot Pranam.
Yeah.
Mamaite manasha yat yan asho aham iti bhuvan griniyat yat puman rattam karma yena punarbhava.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Thank you very much. Anybody else, please?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, I am also trying.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please.
Mamaiti manusha yajjat vasahamiti bruvan grinya tatpumam radham karma yena punarbhavaha.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare
Anybody
Krishna,
else?
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Mamuite manushayadat ashavaham iti bruvan grihniya tatpuman radhyam karma ena punarbhavaha.
Thank you, Mataji.
Krishna.
Anybody else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Dandot Pranam, Mataji, please.
Thank you. Mamaite manasa yatyad ashab aham iti bruvat grihini yattat pumam radham karma yena puna bhavaha.
Thank you,
Prabhu.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandot Pranam.
Yeah,
Prabhu.
please, Mataji. Yeah.
Mamaite manasha yad asha aham iti brubhan grinhi attat puman radham karma yena punarbhavaha.
Thank you, Mataji.
Krishna.
Can all the devotees read the synonyms?
Yes, Prabhu, I can read.
Yes, please, Mataji.
Mama, mind, iti, all these manasa, by the mind, yat, whatever, so that, aham, I, iti, thus, bruvhan, accepting, grinyat, takes with him, tat, that, punam, the living entity, radham, perfected, karma, work, ena, by which, punaha, again, bhavaha, material existence. Thank you, Prabhu.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Translation, can all the devotees read?
May I, Prabhuji?
Yeah, please, Mataji.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The living entity labors under the bodily conception of I am this, I am that. My duty is this, and therefore I shall do it. These are all mental impressions, and all these activities are temporary. Nonetheless, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity gets a chance to execute all his mental concoctions. Thus, he gets another body. Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Mataji. Thank you very much, Mataji. The purport, again, bit longer purport. So I think probably one paragraph, one devotee can read. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare
Dandot
Krishna,
Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandot Pranam.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
As long as one is absorbed in the bodily conception, his activities are performed on that platform. This is not very difficult to understand. In the world, we see that every nation is trying to supersede every other nation, and that very man is trying to advance beyond his fellow man. All these activities are going on under the name of advancement of civilization. There are many plans for making the body comfortable, and these plans are carried in the subtle body after the destruction of the gross body. It is not a fact that after the gross body is destroyed, the living entity is finished. Although many great philosophers and teachers in this world are under the impression that after the body is finished, everything is finished. This is not a fact. Narad Muni says in this verse that at the time of death, one takes his plan with him, Griniyat, and to execute these plans, he gets another body. This is called Punarbhava. When the gross body is finished, the plan of the living entity are taken by the mind, and by the grace of the Lord, the living entity gets a chance to give these plans shape in the next life. This is known as the law of karma. As long as the mind is absorbed in the laws of karma, a certain type of body must be accepted in the next life. Somebody, should I
Yes.
follow?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else wants to read the next part of the purport?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I am trying.
Yes, please, Prabhu.
Karma is the aggregate of fruitive activities conducted to make the body comfortable or uncomfortable. We have actually seen that when one man was about to die, he requested his physician to give him a chance to live 4 more years so that he could finish his plans. This means that while dying, he was thinking of his plans. After his body was destroyed, he doubtlessly carried his plan with him by means of subtle body, composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. Thus, he would get another chance by the grace of the Supreme Lord, the Super Soul, who is always within the heart. Sarvasya chaham hridisannivishto matta sritir jnanam apohanam cha. In the next birth, he acquires remembrance from the Super Soul and begins to execute his plan begun in the previous life. This is also explained in Bhagavad Gita in another verse. Ishvara sarvabhutanam riddeshe arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarvabhutani yantrarurani maya. Yes, someone else can read.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else wants to continue?
The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Bhagavad Gita 18.61. Situated on the vehicle given by material nature and reminded by the super soul within the heart, the living entity struggles all over the universe to fulfill his plans, thinking, I am a Brahmana, I am a Kshatriya, I am an American, I am an Indian, and so on. All these designations are of the same essence. There is no point in becoming a Brahmana in preference to an American or becoming an American in preference to a Negro. After all, these are all bodily conceptions under the modes of material nature.
Thank you so
Hare
much.
Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you. What a wonderful purport, powerful purport. Srila Prabhupada, before continuing, I just offer my prayer. Guru Gauram Girisheshtam Yo Vishram Dena Sevate Madhavam Tulasi Ram Krishna Kirtim Tiram Sve Nam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Budli Srimate Bhakti Vishram Madhav Swami Tinananda. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome everyone for this morning session of Srimad Bhagavatam, where we continue with chapter 4, canto 4, chapter 29, verse 62. Wonderfully, Prabhupada has covered the bodily conception, how strong it is. And so we'll see that. So this entire bodily conception, it is based on false ego. False ego, the root of the entire material manifestation. So we should understand the enemy that we are against. No? Again, even the third chapter also, Krishna says we should know the enemy. So the false ego it's the most subtle. It's the most subtle element among all the 8 elements. It's the most subtle glue which binds this entire material nature. If false ego is not there, this entire material nature will just collapse. Material manifestation will just collapse. As we have seen in the 7th chapter, he says among the 8 elements, earth, water, air, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. The most subtle he places at the end. Ahankara. So even in the various places in the Bhagavatam, where Vidura is asking Maitreya Muni, there also that is explained. And all similarly, where even Devahuti is asking her son Kapila Muni. So he is also very wonderfully explaining this entire material manifestation, where we'll see how this false ego is the root, absolute root. Mahat Tattvat Vikurvanat Bhagavat Virya Sambhavat Kriya Shaktir Ahankaras Trivida Sama Padyata Vaikarikas Taijasascha Tamasascho Yatho Bhava Manasas Chendriyanam Cha Bhutanam Mahatamapi. This is the material ego springs up from the Mahat Tattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. This is coming from the Lord's own energy. So you can imagine how powerful it is. It is endowed predominantly with active power of 3 kinds: good, passionate, and ignorance. So this false ego only, when it is combined, when it is agitated by the mode of goodness, then it gives rise to the mind. When it is agitated by the mode of passion, it gives rise to intelligence. Agitated by the mode of ignorance, then it gives rise to the organs of action and the gross elements. So this false ego is the thing on which entire platform is based. So even in the 12th canto also, we see this being described. No? Avyakta guna shobha mahatas trivido ahamaha bhuta sukshmendriyatartham sambhava sarga uchyate. From the agitation of the original modes within the unmanifest material nature, the Mahat Tattva arises, and from the Mahat Tattva comes the element false ego, which divides into 3 aspects. This threefold false ego further manifests as the subtle forms of perception, as the senses, the gross sense as the gross sense objects. The generation of all this is called creation. So similarly, we see even in the 11th canto also, similarly, the false ego is mentioned. Will be the translation. When the 3 modes of material nature are agitated, the resultant transformation appears as the element false ego in 3 phases: goodness, passion, ignorance. Created from the Mahat Tattva, which itself is produced from the unmanifest Pradhana. This false ego becomes the cause of all material illusion and duality. So without false ego, nothing. This material manifestation cannot exist. And it is the manifestation of the Supreme Lord himself. It is described in the 10th canto. It is none other than the Supreme Lord manifests his power in the material manifestation as false ego. And this triggers all the components of the material world. As we have seen even here in the 11th canto also, it is described how the false ego only transforms into all the material senses, the sense organs, all the material elements, everything, the false ego only transforms in the various modes, in the goodness, sattva, rajas, and tamas, in the transformations of those components. So we can understand how formidable this energy of the Lord is, this false ego. And it encompasses both spirit and matter. Encompasses both spirit. It's so powerful. No, we are the infinitesimal spirit. What power I can hope to have against this false ego? Vaikarikas taijasascha tamasas chetya aham trivid tan matrendriya manasa karanam chit achit mayaha. So this false ego, which is the cause of physical sensation, the senses and the mind, encompasses both spirit and matter and manifests in 3 varieties, in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And it is the doer, the instrument, and the effect, as we have seen. No, because the doer, without the false ego, we cannot function in this world. So it is the doer and instruments, all these senses of action, senses of getting knowledge, it's all coming from the false ego. Then it's instrument. And the effect, what is the effect? What we are seeing around us, all the material nature, earth, water, air, fire, ether, all this is again coming from the false ego in the mode of ignorance. So we can see how the same. Sometimes we give the example of this in the Chinese cooking as the soy sauce. No, soy, you have the soy noodles, the soy, they make the various tofu, and the sauce also, flavoring is also soy. So similarly, the false ego is everything in the material world. It's the doer, the instrument, as well as the effect. For example, you can see this. Mahat Tattvad Vikurunan Aham Tattvam Vyajayata Karya Karana Kartritma Bhutendriya Manomaya Vaikarikas Taijasascha Tamasas Cheti Aham Trida. Mahat Tattva, the great causal truth, transformed into false ego, which is manifested into three phases: cause, effect, and doer. All such activities are on the mental plane and are based on the material elements, gross senses, and mental speculation. The false ego is represented in three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So, what hope we have against false ego? It is very so. This material consciousness is the cause of my conditioned life. The material conception, which is the origin from the false ego, and we can see this. This what is so wonderful is this living entity. What is powering the false ego? Who is giving the battery for this false ego? It is the living entity's own consciousness. And such a wonderful example is given in the Bhagavatam. It is said, so during the rainy season, the moon is prevented from appearing directly by the covering of the clouds. But what is illuminating those clouds which is covering the moon? Which is illuminated the moon's own rays. Similarly, the living entity in material existence is prevented from appearing directly by what? False ego. And what is illuminating this false ego? It is illuminated by the consciousness of the soul only. So we are powering this false ego, which is actually covering us. And we see in the material world, everything, what all we are seeing around us in the material manifestation is only powered by false ego. And what is behind the false ego? The consciousness. Without the consciousness power, the false ego will not be manifested. And to the extreme when it is characterized, we have seen in the 16th chapter where it is said, it is manifested as a demonic nature, where I am rebelling against the Supreme Lord himself, who has given me all these facilities. I have become inimical to the Supreme Lord when it is carried to the extreme. And I have actually, as a pure soul, I have nothing to do with this material experiences. Absolutely nothing. So as we'll see, even in this 11th canto, it is mentioned, Shoka Harsha Bhaya Krodha Lobha Moha Spradadaya Ahankaryasya Drishyante Janma Mrityuscha Natmanaha. Lamentation, elation, fear, anger, greed, confusion, as well as birth and death are all experiences of the false ego. The living entity has nothing to do with any of this. Living entity is just sitting as an empty witness in the chariot, in the mental chariot. So again, here also it's mentioned that we see an enlightened person who is free from the contamination of material desire does not consider himself to be the performer of bodily activities. Rather, he knows that in all the activities, it's only the senses which are interacting with the sense object. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter also it is said, the Indriya is interacting with the Indriya Artha, with the senses. Senses interacting with the sense objects. The living entity is just a witness. And yet, so busy. I have nothing to do with this material nature. I'm so busy in this material activities. Why? Again, because of false ego. In the 3rd chapter, it is explained. It is said, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Actually, I have nothing to do with this. So similarly, the 3rd canto also, similar thing is said. Very, very similar. When the soul is under the spell of material nature and false ego, identifying his body as a self, he becomes absorbed in material activities. What Prabhupada explained in the purport. And by the influence of false ego, he thinks that he is the proprietor of everything. In constant struggle for material existence, enveloped by this false ego, constant struggle with my mind, constant struggle with other living entities, as explained. Even though I am a particle of even though living entity is a particle of the Supreme Lord. And all this, what it is resulting? Illusory happiness and illusory suffering. Illusory happiness and illusory distress. That it is just like a dream. In the dream, we might undergo so much distress, but once you're woken up, all that is completely forgotten. That even the distress is forgotten, even the so-called happiness also is forgotten. That is so many examples in the Bhagavatam are given where it's compared to just in a dream. In a dream, I may be thinking, oh, I got this so much wealth, so many beautiful women surrounding me, so much power I have got. But once I wake up, it's like earlier there used to be a serial called Mungeri Lal Ke Haseen Sapne. So exactly like Mungeri Lal, I'm having all these dreams, but it's all illusory. And but ultimately, remember, even all these dreams, this illusory happiness, this thing is only as sanctioned by the Supreme Lord, without his sanction. Because again, Prabhupada explains, no? This body, who has given us? Supreme Lord only has given us. And similarly, even in the 12th canto, it is explained. So it is said, the secondary creation which exists by the mercy of the Lord is a manifest amalgamation of the desires of the living entities. This entire manifestation is because of my desires. The Lord does not favor it. The Lord, because I am insisting, the Lord is great. Just as a seed produces additional seeds, activities that promote material desires in the performer produce moving and non-moving forms. And all this mind, we have seen this again. Prabhupada explains, this mind is simultaneously my best friend and worst enemy, which is actually triggering this entire material creation, entire material activities. It's simultaneously my worst enemy and best friend. And how it manifests, this entire bodily conception, how it manifests. It manifests mainly as the male-female attraction. This entire material manifestation based on that. Pumsa striya mithuni bhava metam tayor mito hridaya grantim ahu atograha kshetra sutapta vitthar janasya moho yam aham mameti. So this attraction between male and female is a basic principle of material existence. So Prabhupada has explained again, one country fighting against another. Oh, it's a basic principle again is the male-female attraction. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the heart of the male and female, one becomes attracted to body, home, property, children, relatives, wealth, country, all this. In this way, one increases life's illusions and thinks in terms of I and mine. So how Prabhupada explains, one family is envious against another family, one village envious against another village, one town against another town, and similarly, one country against another country. So this root of this is again false ego in terms of male-female attraction. And no good results. Because again, 5th canto we see this manorathena. No? We are just going in the chapter of the mind, chapter of the chariot of the mind, and he says there's no good qualities result. No good qualities coming from just riding the chariot of the mind. Because today something is good, the same thing tomorrow is condemned as bad. So what good qualities can we go? And all this entanglement is because the living entity has voluntarily chosen to embrace the mind, voluntarily taking some drugs and then complaining that, oh, I am an illusion. But the initial act of taking the drug, I have voluntarily chosen to take the hallucinatory drug, and then I'm going into hallucination. So I cannot blame the hallucination on anyone but me. And everything material is a mental concoction, whatever we see around us. In the 6th canto also, it's explained nicely. The visible objects like wife, children, property are like dreams and mental concoctions. Actually, what we see has no permanent existence. It is sometimes seen, sometimes not. Only because of our past actions do we create such mental concoctions. And because of these concoctions, it's triggering further activities. So further and further, I'm getting entangled. And similar to dreaming, as we have seen earlier also, right? This entire imaginary experience is similar to dreaming. So once we come out of the dream, neither gain nor loss, everything is zero sum at the end of it. And accepting various manifestations as my own identity. What mental models, mental illusions are created, and I'm accepting as my own identity. And that actually is the change, results in the change of bodies. How in the dream we acquire so many bodies, and this taking a new gross body is going permanently into a dream and giving up this body permanently and taking another gross body. Prabhupada has explained that. It's just like going into permanent sleep, and you're acquiring a new body. And this mental conceptions give rise to a variety of bodies. In the Bhagavad Gita also explained the 15th chapter. The devotees are covered in previous verses. How just by the subtle body going from one place to another, it acquires various tendencies, impressions, mental impressions, samskaras. And these samskaras create the different types of sense organs, different types of senses, and ultimately the different types of bodies. And even this fear of giving up my false present body, actually I have nothing to do with this body, but because of this false ego, I got a fear as if this body is my permanent asset, and I don't want to give it up. Even this fear is because of that. We have seen in the 11th canto, we'll see this verse. The fear arises when the living entity misidentifies himself with the material body because of absorption, the external illusionary energy of the Lord. The living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord. He forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. I have nothing to do with this place. I have just come here on tour and I have become permanent resident, even after coming on tour. The bewildering, fearful condition is affected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Maya. So that is the fear. Because of my illusory, I have become totally involved in the movie, getting totally involved in the movie. And the subtle body binds me everlastingly to this cycle of birth and death. Because we have seen the previous verses also, the subtle body doesn't die very easily. The gross body may go, but subtle body carries me from one body to another. And the mind determines my activities and hence my next destination. So again, in the 8th chapter also, he says, whatever I'm thinking at the time of death, that determines my next what happens to me in my next gross body, what I get. So in the 5th canto also, this is similarly explained. No? Sa vasanatma vishayo parakto guna pravaho vikrita shodashatma vibrit prita namabi rupa bhedam antar bhitsvam sa purais tanoti. Because the mind is absorbed in desires for pious and impious, it is naturally subjected to transformations of lust and anger. In this way, it becomes attracted to material sense enjoyment. In other words, mind is conducted by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So, accordingly, when my mind is situated in a higher position, as accepting a higher body, lower position, lower body. So I cannot blame anyone on my fate. And so what is the solution? So only solution is giving up the mental concoctions to attain transcendental consciousness. So in the 2nd chapter also, the Lord tells us that giving up the mental concoctions to attain transcendental consciousness. And how to overcome these mental concoctions? So in the Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter, he gives a clue. He says only by suitable practice and detachment. Suitable practice and detachment. So in the 7th canto, we see this where it is said, the mental concoction of discrimination between good and bad should be accepted as one unit and then invested in the mind. They are talking about mystical yoga, the mystical process, how the mental concoction should be invested in the mind is invested in the false ego invested in the total material energy, and that's a mystical process they give. But it's very difficult, as Arjuna himself says, using this mystical yoga to get over the false ego. So mere repudiation of bodily conception is not sufficient. It's not because we might say, oh, I have overcome false ego, but it's like on the razor's edge, no? So a little bit of trigger, it's like unstable equilibrium. Immediately I fall down again into the material pool. So in the 10th canto also it is said, when the demigods are praying to the Supreme Lord in the womb, very nicely they said, no? They said, someone may say that who aside from devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's feet, there are others who are not devotees, but accepted different processes for attaining salvation. No? What happens to them? In answer to this question, Lord Brahma and other demigods said, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position I may think myself liberated, but my intelligence is impure. Because of that, I will fall down from my position of imagined superiority. No? Think, oh, I have understood everything. No, because the false ego is so strong that because I have no regard for the Lord's lotus feet, so I will fall down again. So again in the Madhya Leela also, it is similarly said. Krishna bhuli se jiva anadi bhahirmukha ateva maya tare deya samsara dukha. Forgetting Krishna, I have been attracted to this external feature from many billions of births. Therefore, the illusory energy gives me all kinds of misery in the material existence. So I should not be surprised why it's happening. After voluntarily coming into the prison, then I'm suffering, oh, why in the prison they are ill-treating me? So it is I have voluntarily come in. So only have the transcendental consciousness, only then that will lead us to the kingdom of God. So what is our only refuge? So how to realize the illusory nature of material existence? So again, in the 11th canto, we see this. Ahankara kritam bandham atmano artha viparyayam vidwan nirvidya samsara chintam turye sthitasthyaje. The false ego of the living entity places him in bondage and awards him exactly the opposite of what I really desire. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy, so-called enjoy, there is no enjoyment actually, material life, and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness. So we've seen Krishna consciousness overcomes this. So without Krishna consciousness, I have no hope of overcoming the material consciousness. So we have seen even the 18th chapter also, the Lord says this. No? So he says, Matchitta sarva durgani mat prasada tarishyasi ata chetvam ahankaran na shrosyasi vinangshasi. If you become conscious of me, the Lord is saying, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. All these obstacles, what Prabhupada has described there. If, however, I do not work in such consciousness of Krishna, but act through false ego, not hearing him, then I will be lost. So similarly, the 14th chapter also, he says the similar thing, how to overcome material conceptions. And by this, only I can hope to pass over the insurmountable ocean of nescience. Otherwise, there is no hope. In the Madhya Lila also, very nice verse is there, which says, Yeshamsa Esa Bhagavan Dayayed Ananta Sarvat Manashrita Pado Yadi Niryalikam Te Dustaram Atitaranti Cha Deva Mayam Naisham Maham Itidhi Swa Srigala Bhakshye. When a person takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without reservation, the unlimited, merciful Lord bestows his causeless mercy upon him. Thus, he can pass over the insurmountable ocean of nescience. Those whose intelligence is fixed in bodily conceptions, who are thinking that I am this body, I am just fit for food for dogs and jackals. I'll never get the mercy of the Lord. So, by doing that, I can give up the concept of I, aham, mameti, as we have seen, aham, mameti. So, only by doing this, I can hope to give up the concept of I and mine. And then I'll be established in this original consciousness. So, you can see in this second canto, which is mentioned, Nirodho Syanu Shayanam Atmana Saha Shaktibihi Muktir Hit Anyata Rupam Swa Rupena Vyavastitihi. So, very nicely, the liberation is different. Muktir Hit Anyata Rupam Swa Rupena Vyavastitihi. The merging of the living entity along with its conditional living tendency within the mystic lying down of Mahavishnu is called winding up the cosmic manifestation. What is liberation? Is the permanent situation of the living entity after he gives up the changeable, gross and subtle material bodies. So it's not sufficient that I just give up one gross body and think that I become liberated. Because as long as the subtle body is there, what hope I have of liberation? So by doing that, I am liberated even in this present body. So very, very interesting comparison is there. Because earlier we have seen false ego, how it manifests as the doer, the instrument, and the object. No? Subject, object, instrument, everything false ego is. And now Krishna is giving us the formula. He is telling you can spiritualize everything. In the 4th chapter, he says, false ego is now he has corrupted us. No, instrument, doer, and this, everything is false ego. But what does he say? Brahmarpanam, Brahma Havir, Brahmagnam, Brahmana Hutam, Brahmaiva Tena Grantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. He tells us to reverse the entire thing, like diamond cutting diamond. No? He says, a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is the same spiritual nature. So Krishna is telling us to reverse the entire thing. He is telling, now you become Brahman, and then automatically all your activities will be Brahman, and what the objects you are doing, that also will be Brahman, and all the automatically all our senses, because we have merged in Krishna consciousness, even the senses are Brahman. Means everything is spiritualized. False ego materializes everything, and when we follow the process of Krishna consciousness, we can reverse it and spiritualize everything. That's it. Yeah. And that's how we get the freedom from material reactions, as is explained in the Bhagavad Gita also, where the Lord says, even though you're fighting, you won't incur sin, because Arjuna is fighting for the Supreme Lord. And only then, finally, real peace is achievable, as Krishna says in 2nd chapter as well as in the 5th chapter. Only by absorption in Krishna consciousness, we can hope to attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. Otherwise, there is no hope. So even in the 3rd canto also, similarly it is said, Nirahankratir nirmamascha nirdvandva samadrik swadrik pratyak prashanta dhir dhira prashantor nir ivo dadihi. Then he says, thus he gradually became unaffected by the false ego of material identity and became free from material affection, undisturbed, equal to everyone, without duality. He could see himself also. His mind was turned inward and was perfectly calm, like the ocean unagitated by waves. So when a mind is fully in Krishna consciousness, fully engaged in rendering devotional service to Lord, so only then I can hope to become like an ocean unagitated by waves. So yeah. So that's why I just want to conclude there. So we have seen very nicely the how powerful this false ego is. It is the basic element of material manifestation, the basic invisible glue which binds everything together. So it's very, very difficult to overcome. And how this false ego, we have seen how it gives rise to various mental concoctions, and the mental concoctions give rise to our various bodies, and how it's so difficult to come out of this bodily cycle, because the subtle body never dies. And then we have seen only by, not just by detachment, but only by the positive process of Krishna consciousness, we can hope to liberate ourselves in this very body. We don't need to wait to give up this subtle body. In this very body, by spiritualizing everything, by reversing the process of false ego, we can attain real peace. So that's where I just wanted to conclude. So if any of the devotees want to add anything or correct anything as well, so please kindly do so. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandvat Pranam.
Dandot Pranam, Prabhu. Dandot Pranam.
Thank you so much for elaborating the whole creation and simultaneously how these bodies form. If you see Canto 2, that's what it describes, how this material cosmic manifestation is happening.
Right.
And that is only because of the false ego, which is carried out by the Lord's energy itself. When this manifestation happens, Lord injects time and this karma and sabhava along with this is what is that? Is eyes on the Mahatattva, Pradhan, and then Pradhan turns into Mahatattva, and everything thereafter happens. So it is the linkage right from the cosmic manifestation till we get a body. So everything is on the sabhava and karma, which is already injected by the Lord itself, with Lord energy, and everything turns into a material body. But the ultimate goal, this material ego or the false ego, we can convert it into a ego in goodness, that is by the Krishna consciousness. When everything is turned into a transcendental form in connection with the Lord, everything turns into a good ego, and that helps us to reach to the ultimate goal of life. And here Srila Prabhupada has given such good examples, and he have elaborated the things, the whole process of how this false ego turns into a good ego and help us to convert our material identity into a transcendental identity. And Lord ultimately helps us to reach that goal. Thank you so much for enlightening in detail and understanding the subject in the right way. And that way, Krishna consciousness can help us to understand the impact of false ego and this living this material body and connected to the spiritual body and reach the ultimate goal of life, which is our ultimate goal. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Prabhu,
Hare
Dandavat
Krishna.
Pranam.
Dandot Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much at the outset, because very nicely elaborated the importance of the false ego, how it influences. And it is the binding force, like a glue, as you have told very nicely. And at the same time, it is the doer, it is the instrument and the object in this material world. It drives everybody with the false ego, is the driving force for everything in this material world. And And you have very nicely at the ultimately you have told the false ego or the materialistic false ego materializes everything.
Correct.
But the panacea for that is the Krishna consciousness, which spiritualize ultimately everything.
Correct.
And in fact, because the false ego is so powerful, because it is Lord's own energy, and as stated in verse 7.14 in Bhagavad Gita, the Daiviyesha Gunamayi Mama Mayadutta, very difficult to overcome, extremely difficult, because it's God's energy, and one cannot do it himself. Only by surrendering unto him. That means only by Lord's intervention. When we get the mercy of the Lord through his devotees, or who are representative of the Lord in one sense, or again the Lord himself in the form of devotees, when they extend their hand, and with their mercy only we can overcome it. And you have very nicely explained it. Thank you once again for that.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. No, thank you, brother. Thank you for pointing out that. There are no other question or comment. Should we conclude here, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu, if there is no other person, it appears no other person. If anyone wants to say, otherwise, yes, you can close the
Thank you.
session.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Thank you, the dear devotees. Thank you once again.
Vancha
Vishnu namo namah. Ananta koti
अनंतगति वैष्णव वृंदो की जय
की
तेज गणेश
जय।
पोषक माधव प्रभु की जय शिला प्रभुपाद की जय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि
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 बोल।
बोल all glories to assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for a nice class. Thank you.
Thank you.